Hello everybody and welcome back to the Lord of the Rings AI free-for-all in Civilization 5. This is part 2, and before we go ahead and begin continuing our game, I was just going to go ahead and do a quick overview of the current situation on the world map as of 1910. And as you guys can probably see, Middle-earth has evolved technologically, and there are cannons, machine guns, riflemen, and the Industrial Revolution has hit Middle-earth. It is a bit strange and a bit anachronistic, but we can go ahead and give civilization that benefit of the doubt. So let's go ahead and give an overview of what's going on here. In the west of Middle-earth, we, of course, have the Dunedains. They're very powerful at this moment. They control the majority of the western, I guess, coast of Middle-earth, and their main competitor is in the form of the Ringwraiths. I believe these are the Angmar. That is correct. So there are 3 more Angmar cities. It'll be interesting to see how this future situation plays out. I'm of the impression that they will be wiped out by the ambitions of the Dunedains. And going east, of course, we have the the Eldar Elves. And the Eldar Elves are in a very good position. Much like the Sylvan Elves to the east, they control a very sizable chunk of central Middle-earth. And we will see how they react to the growing ambitions of their eastern elven neighbors, the Sylvan Elves. And you guys might have remembered from the last video, but they have recently conquered the Rohan capital that was being held by, I believe, the Orcs. And the Orcs have been absolutely removed from the map. There are no more Orcs. Moving northeast, we of course have the Dwarves, and the Dwarves have quite a bit of ambition on this map. They control all of northeastern Middle-earth, with the exception of this patch up here, and they're forming more and more cities along the northern stretches of Mordor. They control a few of these mountains, but they're not able to actually penetrate into Mordor, which is currently still held by Saruman, although Saruman does not control too much outside of this territory. And sorry, not Saruman, I should say Sauron. These names are a bit confusing to me. I will try my hardest to rectify and correct any mistakes I'm making. And we left off in our last episode with Minas Tirith, the capital of Gondor, being under siege by quite a few different foreign forces, mainly consisting of Mordor and I believe also the Herodians, but the Herodians, I believe, just recently sued for peace, as did the Dwarves, and there might be a little bit of respite in the future for Gondor, although they are surrounded by quite a few ambitious enemies. And last but not least, we do have Harad. They are in a very interesting position, as you guys can see. They are in the very southeast and south central part of Middle-earth, and they occupy a very strategically sound area of the map. As you guys can see, they have a few tiles here in Mordor, and there's actually no way for them to get into Mordor without going through the passes near Mount Doom and Gorgoroth, but they do have the tiles, so we will see how this plays out. And without further ado, I will resume this game, and we will go ahead and zoom in on this conflict over here between Gondor and Mordor. So I believe this is the only current active war we have. I can go ahead and look around the map just to make sure and confirm that this is what's going on here. There's actually a war between the Dunedains and the Eldar Elves as well, I believe. I will go back to that as soon as this conflict over here is winding up. It seems that Gondor has been able to produce quite a bit more military units in defense of their homeland. And they are, they're very stalwartly defending the capital of Minas Tirith. Of course, they lost their second city to Harad, most unfortunately. And it would seem that the elves, the Sylvan Elves, have declared war on Mordor. We will see how that goes. Perhaps this will help Gondor indirectly, as the stress is relieved from the defense of their capital, and they will be able to push on the offensive on Mount Doom. Of course, the defense of Mount Doom is paramount to Mordor's survival, but at this point, Mordor's expansionism has been halted. They're stuck at the mountain passes past Mount Doom, and I believe the Black Gates. We will go over here to the west to see how the conflict between the Dunedains and the Eldar Elves is going. it seems that there is quite a bit of détente or trench warfare going on here, although there has been a recent incursion into central Eldar territory, with perhaps an invasion group heading towards the city of Imladris, if I pronounce that correctly. Going back to the southeast, as you guys can see, Gondor is most definitely safe for the time being, although Harad still has some units in their territory. I'm not quite sure if they're still at war. I was under the impression that Harad declared peace with Gondor, but it has appeared they have not. So Harad is content with sacking the countryside of Gondor, while Gondor is busy defending their capital. And peace has been made between the two great western civilizations, the Elves and the Dunedains. We will keep an eye on them in the future to see what's going on. There's a massive military buildup over here with the dwarves. They are building up a massive military. And the Witch King has entered the modern era. The Ring Wraiths have access to modern weapons, which is pretty scary now that you think of it, especially for anybody who has the One Ring, as I believe they can identify and scout out anybody who has the power to turn invisible. Ironically, if you turn invisible in the Lord of the Rings worlds, you are as if you have a tracer dart on you to these Ring Wraiths, so I wouldn't advise doing it, unless of course you are crazy, or the Hobbits, which were wiped out. And I believe the next big conflict will be between the Ring Wraiths and the Dunedains. In fact, they just declared war. This will be an interesting conflict to watch, as the rest of Middle-earth is in peace, or in a moment of peace anyways. So we will watch this conflict and see who pulls ahead. I was under the impression that the Dunedains would have almost a runaway victory here, but it appears they are being invaded. Let's see if they are able to take on the defensive and push back the forces. Of course, down the south, Hobbiton is being besieged by the Dunedain forces, and it is on the threshold of being conquered. I believe this turn it will be switching hands, and it has been. It is being burned to the ground. Hobbiton, the last vestige outside of the Shire of historical Hobbit territory, is being burned. And we will see if the Ring Wraiths will be able to be taking it back. It seems like they will not be able to in this particular turn. And let's take a look if they can take it back this turn. They cannot. Hobbiton will burn to the ground. And the Witch King is on the defensive now, as the Dunedains are pressing forward. But luckily for the Ring Wraiths, most of the military was engaged with Hobbiton. So a lot of the military that the Dunedains are fielding right now is to the south and central part of the map. Additionally, we have some barbarians in their territory. And would you look at that, a city revolts. A city has joined the Eldar Elves, actually. The Shire is in elven hands, and the Elves decided to burn the capital of the Hobbits. This is most unfortunate, as any history of the Hobbits is being erased from Middle-earth. As I said earlier in the previous installment of this series, it seems that there is a bug with this mod that allows original capitals to be burned to the ground. So this will be a very interesting, peculiar situation where I believe it switched to the Eldar Elves because they had more happiness and they were a neighboring, I believe, great power. I'm not really quite sure what the algorithm is for that, but the fact of the matter is that the Eldar have control of the Shire, and they are burning down what was once a great city with access to plenty of strategic and luxury resources. Very, very unfortunate. And furthermore, it appears that the Elves are declaring war on the Dunedains and the Dwarves. The Dwarves are actually at war with the Eldar Elves and not the Sylvan Elves, so they will have to move any troops that they are fielding through their territory. And I'm going back here to the east. As you guys can see, Mordor is still on the defensive. Nothing special has really changed over here. It seems that they are locked in conflict, as they always are. We are going back to the west, where the Shire is now in the hands of the Dunedains, who have decided to also burn it down. And look at these Eldar Elves. They are obsessed with fire, as they set fire to their newly acquired city of Fornost, which was indeed a Dunedain possession. I'm not quite sure if the Ringwraiths are still at war with the Dunedains, but the Dunedains are being ravaged by both the elves and rebels. As you guys can see, the rebels are posing a huge problem to the continued sovereignty of this country, and the Dunedains have been knocked down in size quite a bit. And if we go here to the south, you guys can see that the Sylvan Elves are actually expanding into historically Gondor territory with their new city of Iminduer. I believe I tried to pronounce that correctly. So the Sylvan Elves, once again, are incredibly expansionist, and they will definitely come into conflict with at least Gondor or Harad in the distant future. We will see, of course, if the Eldar Elves are able to continue their offensive with the dwindling amount of troops that they have in their territory. Once again, both empires are exceedingly over-encumbered at this point, but the Elves have captured yet another Dunedain city, which they are promptly burning to the ground. You would think that these Elves are orcs at the rate that they're setting fire to things, but the Dunedains have recaptured the city, much to the delight of the population. The population was worried that the same fate would suffer them as Hobbiton and their northeastern territories, and the Ringwraiths are looking on quite optimistically as the Witch King eyes his rival to the southwest with thirsty eyes. Perhaps they will be declaring war on them shortly. And as we go back down here to Minas Tirith, we can see that Gondor is setting out an emergency settler in hopes of settling a new land. If I was them, however, I would have sent it south of these mountains. And it appears that Harad is dominating Gondor with their artillery, but there is actually no melee military unit in place to take the city in the event that they are able to take it down a notch. And wow, a pivotal moment has transpired in Middle-earth. For the very first time, atomic weapons have been developed by the Sylvan Elves. You would think that a peaceful wood or nature-based race would not invest in nuclear technology, but this is an alternative Middle-earth history. I will reiterate that none of this actually happens in Lord of the Rings. There are no guns or battleships or paratroopers. This is all just civilization. But perhaps I should have actually locked the eras into the medieval or the Renaissance period. That way, these units would be a little bit more tailored to Middle-earth. I was considering it, but what makes this, civilization AI free-for-all so interesting is that it has no constraints like the other installations. So we will be having nuclear weapons exchanges, perhaps between the elves or their southern or western neighbors. Going over here to the western side of things, the elves have finally decided to not burn the city that they are burning down 2 times in a row. It seems the 3rd time they captured the city, they changed their mind and decided to puppet the small little city of Arthedain. And the Dunedains have been knocked down into a 4-province minor country. Once again, both of the elves control almost half of Middle-earth at this point. Quite unexpectedly as well, we have a new settlement by the Ringwraiths in the southeastern corner of Middle-earth, right next to Gondor. And the Witch King and the Dwarves have declared war on Gondor in anticipation of the inevitable decline and morose that Gondor has been facing for the past, really, thousands of years. Harad is on the move of taking their 2nd city, which they have promptly puppeted. And Minas Tirith is really about to experience a very terrible time in its history. But of course, I have been saying this a lot in this game. Minas Tirith, of course, does have 121 defense. It will take quite a bit of tanks and artillery and nukes to take the city down to size. It is a massive metropolis built upon the mountains. Perhaps this is what it would look like if it engaged in an industrial revolution. It is, of course, situated on the mountain, just like in the movie and books. And coming over here to the eastern part of the map, we see that the elves and the dwarves have a massive army. I mean, look at this army on the part of the dwarves. They have machine guns, infantry, anti-aircraft guns. Really, the only thing the dwarves lack in number are the aircraft that will make the elves such a dangerous force to be reckoned with. Of course, the elves have, I believe, 6 bombers in their immediate sanctimony, or patrimony, I should say. So that will play out very interesting. The creator of this mod did indeed endow Middle-earth with oil resources and, of course, uranium as well, but it is spattered across the map quite unevenly, so the actual distribution of these resources really lies in the hands of the isolationist powers that you guys see. The big 3, as I refer to them, are, of course, the Eastern Dwarves, the Middle Empire of the Sylvan Elves, and the Western Empire of the Eldar Elves, who have recently captured the next city from the Dunedains, which they have also burned down. And recently, the dwarves have also developed their own nuclear weapon, probably in their home city of Erebor, on their mountain. They have a lot of paratroopers, and this will be great because it'll allow them to go into Mordor for their eventual conquest, hopefully, of Mordor. Now, you guys might remember that Mordor was my crowd favorite, or my fan favorite, I should say. I was really hoping for them to pull ahead, but at this point they're stagnating very, very hard. They are the sick man of Middle-earth, and much like Gondor, they face certain extinction. As soon as Gondor falls, I believe there will be a scramble for Mordor, much like there was an historical scramble for Africa, as the colonialist or neo-colonialist Middle-earthen powers seek to perhaps colonize this barren and arid land, which does actually have resources of uranium and oil, if I remember correctly. And Gondor just does not give up. I mean, as you guys can see, a capital of 30, very, very large. They continuously send out more and more settlers in an attempt of surviving. But at this point, the only way to get away would be to go north through, oops, sorry, my camera sometimes screws up like that, north through Mirkwood, and perhaps settling up here in the northern mountains. Really, the only safety that they might have is on the far northwest. Maybe perhaps ally themselves with the Dunedains, who are quickly falling out of favor in this game. The elves have 8 bombers, very, very, very scary. But Gondor has continuously survived, much to the surprise of myself and perhaps my viewers. They have 2 settlers heading west, I believe, perhaps through Elven territory if the elves allow them to go through. But let's go ahead and take a moment to appreciate really what these empires are looking like. Of course, Harad is expanding to the south, but they lack the population and technology of their northern, I guess, brethren. As you guys can see, the elves have absolutely huge cities, 26, 33, 34, 24, 22, massive, absolutely massive. And the other elves are not much worse off. Of course, they have a little bit of less population just by virtue of the fact that they're not surrounded by forests. And the Dunedains, as you guys can see, only have 2 cities now. Very, very sad. The Ring Wraiths probably will capitalize. Sorry, they have 3 cities. They might capitalize on this power vacuum that has just opened up in Western Middle-earth. But for the moment, it seems that the powers are content to punch Gondor into submission, if they're actually ever able to do so. Of course, Gondor has been trying with much failure into trying to get passage through the Sylvan Elven territory, but the Sylvan Elves just will not let it happen. They have their own wall of infantry preventing these settlers from getting through. They know exactly that their previous enemy of Gondor is trying to move on and survive, which is against everything that they're thinking that they need. Of course, Sul'dam has recently completed the atomic or nuclear weapons, so we're going to have nuclear weapons in the south, we're going to have nuclear weapons in the northeast, and in the central part of this map. This will prove to be a very interesting modern period for Middle-earth. Once again, we have a little bit of conflicts going on here in north-central Middle-earth, north of Mordor, where it looks like the dwarves are moving in on Gondor. And let's take a moment to appreciate the Dwarven ambitions over here in Lake Huron. I believe that's what the name of this is called. They have battleships and submarines and frigates and destroyers. It seems a bit overkill for a lake they completely control in every aspect of that word. There are so many troops here between the dwarves and the elves that there's really no room to move their troops. This will prove to be quite interesting in the days to come. Minas Tirith has for the first time fallen half of its health down, and would you guys look at this? I know I don't usually get an excited announcer voice, but we're going to get an excited announcer voice. Minas Tirith is about to fall for the first time in Middle-earthen history. This is absolutely incredible. Of who it will fall to, I think we can safely guess it will fall in Harad's hands, which will give them a very, 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 very nice geopolitical clout here in central Middle-earth. Perhaps they will not be able to take it, but at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I will go ahead and say that next month, Minas Tirith, capital of the Gondor, it will fall, and yet another civilization has been wiped out quite mercilessly in this installment of this Civilization Deathmatch series. Perhaps it's merciful at this point, though, because these people have been suffering on the hands of every single surrounding power for thousands of years, and unexpectedly the Herodians have decided to burn the city to the ground. Of course, now all of the buildings are, that Middle Eastern orange color. I'm not really quite sure what happened. Perhaps they decided to do a paint job on the city before burning it down. Very, very unceremonious. In fact, to my knowledge, 3 original capitals have been burned to the ground, including Minas Tirith, Isengard, and the Shire. And now, for the first time in history, we have a war between Harad and Gondor. Gondor is falling really fast. As you guys look at that, Gorgoroth is taking damage, I believe, probably from the bombers of near Harad and Sunland. I'm not sure if these are historical names. Of course, the modders probably ran out of names when coming up with civilization names for their cities. I know a lot of these people in Middle-earth only had, a few cities, perhaps only one, like the Shire or Hobbiton. But we will see what happens as the Herodians decide to abandon their sun-filled desert empire in search of the ashen volcanic lands of Mordor. And the Witch King has declared peace with the remnants of Gondor, and most unfortunately, the only thing that's left of Gondor is, in fact, a settler in Mordor territory. We'll see if they'll be able to perhaps resettle Minas Tirith after perhaps the Herodians leave, the Haradrims leave. And there is, of course, a Gondorian worker looking for work in the Ringwraithen lands. Ringwraithen? Angmar lands. Let's just go with the Angmar lands. It sounds a little bit better. Perhaps there's a war going on over here in the west. Let's go ahead and focus on this for a little bit. We've been neglecting the west for quite some time. It seems that there is not a war going on currently. So let's go ahead and zoom in on these lands here. Not too bad. And would you guys look at that? While we were busy over there, Gorgoroth has been, in fact, captured by Harad. This is monumental in the history of Middle-earth, as Mordor has, for the first time, been successfully penetrated. We are seeing the rise of a new superpower in the south. Once they take control, if they take control of Mordor, they will be in a very, very excellent position to strike out at the dwarves and elves from a very defendable and defensible area of Middle-earth. Capitalizing on the vulnerability of Mordor, the dwarves are sending in their paratroopers into Mordor. Like I said, once again, this is incredibly anachronistic, but let's just appreciate for the moment that dwarves are coming from jet planes and helicopters and have parachutes on. I mean, geez, that's got to be very, very interesting. As well as the elves, the Sylvan elves are also capitalizing on Sauron's vulnerability. Once again, apologies for the camera. It has a mind of its own between these turns, it would seem. So, really, really interesting as we see the dwarves have absolutely spammed paratroopers, and they're sending them over the wall into the capital lands of Mordor. Perhaps sensing an inevitable decline in his fortunes, Sauron has opted to make yet another settler that, much like Gondor, might not have much luck in escaping the inevitable. Of course, Gondor does have a settler over here who is, I guess, has token safety the presence of Mount Doom. It's a bit ironic. And would you look at that, the Dark Tower itself has been conquered by the dwarves. We will see if they can hold it. Perhaps it will fall back to the Sauron. Not the Sauron. It is a bit late here in Texas. I believe it's 5 in the morning. And it's been recaptured. As you guys can see, the Dark Tower has been recaptured by Mordor, but it will swiftly fall to the paratrooping squad of the dwarves next turn. Once again, it has been recaptured. And the dwarves actually control 2 original capitals now, in addition to their first capital. So I believe that they are the only Civ in the game currently to control 3 capitals, which puts them ahead, I believe, of most other civilizations. And the Battle of Mount Doom has just begun. We have tank regiments from Harad, in addition to paratrooping regiments from the dwarves. There are Dwarven regiments coming from the east, Haradian infantry and tanks supporting from the south. Mount Doom will fall, but to whom, it is unknown at this point. And it fell to the dwarves. I'm sure Harad is absolutely pissed at this point. I certainly would be. And let's go ahead and take a look at the world map. I mean, if there was any doubt that we lived, or that Middle-earth was in a multipolar world, we can see that there are clearly 4 world powers at play. Both of the elves are in a very good position. The dwarves too, of course. And the Haradians, they're in a very good position themselves. And as I've only seen the movies, I don't know too much about Harad, but I'm under the impression that they're human, or at least humanoid. So perhaps the last holdout of humanity lies in the hands of the Haradian Empire. We will see which race will ultimately be destined to rule Middle-earth. If not in this installment, then definitely in the next one. I know that the time for this particular video is coming to a close relatively soon. Don't worry, I'm not ending the video just yet, but just a heads up. And would you look at that? Minas Tirith has been refounded across the river by Gondor settlers, or Gondor survivors. To say how long it will last is uncertain, although I will definitely say it won't last very long. Almost immediately, the elves, as I've said this, have declared war. It's gonna be brutal, guys. I mean, they lasted less than a turn. Oh, wow. And the elves have taken Minas Tirith for themselves. This time they opted not to burn it. Perhaps a good idea. Do these guys have elven ears, these infantry? I guess there's really no way of knowing with their helmets on. But, wow, would you look at that. A very militant society, these elves. I wouldn't be too surprised if they took autocracy as their ideology, or perhaps order. Now, the only war currently going on in Middle-earth is... Whoa, would you look at that? There's 2 wars going on. I'm going to zoom in on the more interesting one between the 2 world superpowers. The dwarves have declared war on the Sylvan Elves. This is monumental, ladies and gentlemen. This is truly a world war in the making, as both sides are absolutely souped out with military technology. Would you look at this? Northern Mirkwood has been surrounded in an enveloping tactic by the dwarves. They have completely surrounded Northern Mirkwood, but they are sustaining heavy, heavy, heavy casualties. Let's go to the south, where Mount Doom is at war with Minas Tirith. And going to the west very temporarily, the Witch King has lost a city. Of course, it's being burned down, but we don't really care. Let's focus on this world war, which is by far more interesting. I'm sure you guys would agree. Northern Mirkwood is taking heavy, heavy fire. under burning, or I should say bombing campaigns from the dwarves, it seems that the once great and prosperous capital of the elves is being taken down. We will find out next turn. Absolutely insane. You guys have seen it first on this video. Northern Mirkwood has been taken down by the dwarves, and there's a lot of war going on here in the south. I believe Harad just captured a elven city, and the elves are in full decline at this moment. I never thought this would be possible. They looked like a very strong contender for world domination, but the dwarves decided to renege on their friendship and engage in some previous hostilities. They've just been nuked, ladies and gentlemen. The dwarves have just been nuked by the elves. The elves are fucking pissed. Would you look at that? The great city of the dwarves has been reduced to rubble. Absolutely insane, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely insane. The ringwraiths have been taken out of the game. Would you look at that? And the elder elves are making a move on the Dunedains. I can't even keep up with the amount of intense action going on in this particular Let's Play. As you guys can see, Minas Tirith is falling quickly. Perhaps it will be taken by the dwarves. Nuclear holocaust is happening here. And wow, the Rivendell elves have came, they have seen, and they have conquered all of this Dunedain territory. Wow. Absolutely relentless, the amount of hostilities we see being exchanged across the elven and dwarven borders here. Would you look at this? So much is going on. I can't even keep, in contact with how many things are being set ablaze. As you guys can see, the Eldar elves have destroyed everything that the Dunedains have once held as their own. They're burning it down to the ground. And the Sylvan elves are fighting for their survival, but they are being nuked relentlessly by the dwarves, perhaps in a sort of nuclear retaliation. The entirety of Middle Earth, let's see if I can say that again, Middle Earth is being nuked. It's a nuclear holocaust, something that Tolkien could have never possibly predicted in any of his novels. A valiant defense, though. Let's go ahead and give it out to the defenders of Minas Tirith. A very valiant defense here on the periphery of the Sylvan Empire, which is in full decline. There was a Cold War, and this is the ending of the Cold War. But in this universe, communism did not collapse, and the superpower did not collapse due to economic stagnation. No, this is mutually assured destruction. This is a nuclear holocaust, ladies and gentlemen. This is something that is absolutely terrible. Things are being set afire, as you guys can see. Probably up here to the north, yep. And just like that, the Eldar elves have destroyed everything to the west and northwest. We will see if they can survive the future desires and ambitions of the rising power of Harad and the dwarves. Let's zoom back in on the conflict over here. Has peace been declared? I don't believe so. Helm's Deep will perhaps be the next city to fall to the Dwarven advance. Of course, the dwarves are sending in some reinforcements, some helicopters. And a lot of workers from the east are flocking to repair the nuclear fallout of their capital at Erebor. The elves have no such luck, as all of their workers have been annihilated in the nuclear maelstrom that is enveloping both countries. Perhaps the next city to fall will be the former capital of Edoras of the Rohan Empire. As you guys can see, my alarm just went off for the suggested. Like I said, my brain is dying slowly from lack of sleep. The suggested video time has passed, but don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue this Let's Play, or at least this version, until there's a conclusive end to this current war between the dwarves and elves. The dwarves have just captured the Rohan capital, which has just changed hands once again. This is hell, absolute hell. Nobody's the winner here. It is quite possibly the dictionary definition of a Pyrrhic victory. Of course, named after Pyrrhus of Epirus, after his quote-unquote victories that he brought to his kingdom were met with a tremendous amount of loss of life and men. But would you look at that? The the Sylvan Elves have been wiped out of central Middle-earth. The only place that they currently subside in is, of course, Mordor, which is itself on a periphery. The dwarves now control all of eastern and central Middle-earth. This is absolutely incredible. Of course, the dwarves are in a position of keeping these cities for themselves. They opt not to burn down any cities, as most of the nuclear exchange between the two superpowers has brought fire upon their lands anyways. But to the east, they have a very strong industrial production center, as we have very strong cities of Runsi and Khazad-dûm. Fantastic. Erebor will definitely regain its former glory as workers flock in to repair the nuclear fallout. But I believe that this is as good a time as any to end this particular episode of the Lord of the Rings AI Deathmatch. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I certainly did. This has been a very, very fun series to do. Stay tuned for part 3. It'll be out very soon. We live currently in a world where there are only 3 powers, or 3 superpowers, with 1 city-state. Really, this will be a battle of wits between the Herodians, the dwarves, and the remaining Eldar elves. It seems that it would appear on the surface, at least, that the dwarves are in an upper position, but I want to remind my viewers that being in a centrally located position, it does not always work out very well, as you guys remember from the orcs and the Isengard individuals, and even the Sylvan Elves. Maintaining this great territory is, of course, very beneficial for large empires such as the Dwarven Empire, but it will invite an envious desire from both the Southern Empire of the Herodians and the Western Empire of the Elves. Perhaps they will both attack at the same time to bring the dwarves down a size. We don't know. But like I said, guys, stay tuned. Absolute carnage awaits us in the next installment of this series. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.